There are few moments in the world of sport that live on in history. One, especially for me as an American, immediately comes to mind. Well before I was born, in the year 1980, there was a moment during the Winter Olympics in Lake Placid, New York, that became one of those few moments. The iconic lines of Al Michaels rang out on televisions around the world. Do you believe in miracles? In that moment, a team full of American college athletes, against incredible odds stacked against them based on experience and skill, beat the greatest national ice hockey team in the world, which at that time was the Soviet Union. This moment would go on to be one of the greatest sporting achievements in history. Moments like that are truly miracles. In football, we have had the 2004 Euro win by Greece. In 2016, the 1,000-1 odd Premier League win by Leicester City. And most recently, the invincible season by Bayer Leverkusen in the Bundesliga, who after being in relegation trouble for part of last season, now dethroned the giant that is Bayern Munich, while also not losing a single game in domestic competitions. Moments like these live long in memory, and today, you're about to witness one of the greatest miracles in Football Manager history. Let's go. Day one on every job is always unique. Most people try to adapt to their new surroundings, their new coworkers, or just try to get through the day. However, when it is a football club, it is a bit different, especially when it is one you have supported your whole life. So, for the Celtic boss, Chris Watt, it already felt like home. Day one consisted of analyzing the squad, looking at potential, and putting together a system. A system for the players would need to complement them, bring out their best, and make sure that they could always perform at the top of their game. All roads would eventually lead to a system that would of course fit star man Kyogo Furuhashi. That system would be Gormy's 4-3-3 Mando. However, like every manager wanting to establish their own DNA on their squad in the way they play, tweaks would be made to allow for all the players' best abilities to shine. Real Hatate would move into the Mezzala role instead of playing as a box-to-box midfielder. Kyle McGregor would go playmaker instead of a ball-winning midfielder in the defensive midfield to allow for play to build up from deep. And Alistair Johnson would become a wingback instead of an inverted fullback to allow him to progress up the pitch and utilize his pace and creativity. All of these very welcome changes to the initial system, as this would help the side play to their max potential and beyond. The season would get off to an okay start. Watts Celtic would record points in all three of their matches in the opening of the league campaign, a 4-1 win against Ross County, a 0-0 draw at Aberdeen, followed by another 4-1 victory, this time over St. Johnstone. This would see Celtic accrue 7 points out of the possible 9 to start the season. Amidst these matches was their first match in the League Cup as well, which would see them push aside Stirling Albion by a score of 3-0 away from home, which would see Celtic onto the quarterfinal of the League Cup. Kicking off September was the first big match of the season, the heated rivalry of the Old Firm Derby. This would be Watt's first test as to how his adapted system would really fare against the top quality side. Now that isn't to take away from the other great and talented sides within the Scottish leagues, but Celtic and Rangers are the cream of the crop when it comes to Scottish football, always making this one of the biggest clashes of the year. Kyogo Furuhashi was riding high into this match as he had just bagged himself a hat-trick against St. Johnstone in the match prior, so he'll be looking for a repeat performance to keep the good times rolling. Those good times would continue rolling 7 minutes into the match as he would put Celtic up 1-0 early on. They would go in at half up 1-0 over Rangers, and would come out wanting more. In the 49th minute, Dyson Maeda would add a second for Celtic. Come the 60th minute, Loney, Paulo Bernardo from Benfica would back himself a goal as well. 4 minutes later, Real Hatate would make it 4-0, and in the 78th minute, Luis Palma would cap off a massive 5-0 victory for Watt's men. Celtic could really be the real deal in the domestic game this season if they could have even more performances like that throughout. After that match against Rangers, Celtic would have 3 more league matches in the month of September. They would face Dundee at home, Livingston away, as well as Motherwell away. All 3 matches would end in 3 points, with a total of 10 goals for and only 1 against. Within the month of September, the Champions League also got underway for Watt's side, which would see them in a very difficult group. They would see themselves drawn into Group D along the likes of PSG, Arsenal, as well as Lazio. They landed themselves in the group of death, leaving a very bleak outlook on how their campaign in continental Europe could unfold. Either they go down swinging, or they reach for the stars and see how far they can go. The first match in the group would see them take on Mbappe's PSG at Celtic Park. Starting off with the big dogs immediately. Sick. Surprisingly enough, it would be 0-0 at half. So far, that counts as an absolute win. It was looking as if the match would end in a 0-0 draw. That was, until the substitute Orhan Gayu would put one home in the 80th minute, sending Celtic fans into hysterics. However, PSG midfielder Fabian would net a goal immediately after restart, bringing Celtic back down to earth. With 9 minutes left in the match, plus added time, anything was possible, surely. PSG could add a second and break the hearts of fans and players alike. Or, Orhan Gayu could bag himself a second goal in the 93rd minute, once again sending the fans into the upper stratosphere at this point, as their side would start off their Champions League campaign with a massive 2-1 win over PSG at Celtic Park. Also within the month of September was the League Cup quarterfinal match, which would see Celtic take on Aberdeen. Once again, it would be a tough match that would need extra time to settle it. It would be 3-3 heading into extra time, where in the 118th minute and 121st minute, the midfield duo of Matt O'Reilly and David Turnbull would send Celtic through to the semi-finals by a score of 5-3, which this would see Hearts Midlothian as their obstacle coming up in November. When October arrived, Celtic were riding on the highest of highs. They just won all 4 of their league matches, saw themselves through to the semi-final of the League Cup, as well as beating the Giants of PSG 2-1 at Celtic Park. This good form led them on to dominating the league once again. Kilmarnock, Hearts, and Hibernian would all arrive to put a stop to Celtic's great form, and they would all fail in doing so. A total of 14 goals for and 3 against within league play for the month of October had Celtic flying at this point of the season. There would also be 2 Champions League matches in the month of October, both of them being away from home as well. The first would be a trip to Rome to take on Lazio at the Stadio Olimpico, one of the toughest places in Europe to get a result. So, leaving at one point, a 0-0 draw was a welcomed result. This left the last club Watt's side had yet to play in their group. That was Arsenal. Now, Arsenal, like PSG, are a super team compared to what Watt has at his disposal at Celtic. Arsenal have the better talent. They also have a way bigger transfer budget. The 2 things they don't have that Celtic does, though, is heart and determination to prove the doubters wrong. On their trip to the Emirates in North London, Celtic would find themselves up 1-0 through none other than starman Kyogo Furuhashi. A 1-0 lead at half, away from home, against one of the Premier League giants that is Arsenal. That'll do just fine. It would get even better in the second half, as in the 57th minute, Kyogo would make it a brace for himself. Celtic 2, Arsenal 0. Who would have thought that? Would have been nice to keep the clean sheet, but in the 86th minute, Arsenal got one back through Kai Havertz. But that wouldn't be enough, as Celtic see out another major win in their Champions League group. November would arrive and it would see a very busy first half of the month, with 4 games in 12 days' time between the league itself, the League Cup semi-final, as well as a Champions League match, which we will get into that in a moment. League-wise, it was another dominant month, going 3 for 3 with wins against St. Mirren, Aberdeen, and Motherwell. The Aberdeen match was for sure a welcome sight, as they finally could see them off in regulation by a score of 5-0. The League Cup semi-final would see Celtic travel to Hampden Park to try and see themselves through to a cup final. With goals from Matt O'Reilly, Kyogo Furuhashi, and Louis Palma, it was made possible as Celtic would down Hearts 3-0, which would set up a date against St. Mirren in the League Cup final, which would be played in December. Champions League-wise, both Arsenal and PSG would feature in November's fixtures. This time, Arsenal would come to Celtic Park, and after a great performance away at the Emirates, confidence was high as they thought that they could go on and do it again. Confidence was so high, in fact, that Kyogo Furuhashi would get Celtic on the board in the opening minute of the match. After that, there wouldn't be another goal scored until the 93rd minute, when Louis Palma, who's having a very good under-the-radar season, would go on to seal the deal and make it a 2-0 win over Arsenal at Celtic Park. The second match for the Champions League this month was of course against PSG, and this time it was at the Parc des Princes. Watt knew they would have to be on their A game to get another big result against PSG, with the match this time being away from home. Unfortunately, the repeat performance was not to be. Mbappe would put PSG up 1-0 in 26 minutes, would net himself a brace in the 30th minute, leaving Celtic searching for an answer 2-0 down at half. Celtic would find an answer through Odin Thiago Holm in the 68th minute, However, it would not be enough seeing PSG defeat Celtic by a score of 2-1, which would not only mark their first loss of the Champions League campaign, but their first loss in any competition all season so far. December had arrived, marking the end of the calendar year, but also the time to start planning for January business. First though, Watt's Celtic side would have to deal with 9 matches in this month alone, along with one being the League Cup final against St. Mirren. There would be 7 league matches to contend with, 3 of which would take place before the final Champions League group match as well as the League Cup final. In those 3 matches, St. Johnstone, Hibernian, and Kilmarnock would all rise to the occasion to meet the Green Monster that has become Celtic within the league, and they would all fail, losing by a combined total of 13-3 in a week's time. The latter 4 matches will be Ross County, Livingston, Dundee, and Rangers, all of whom would lose to Celtic by a combined total of 11-1, making Celtic's league run in December 7-7 while outscoring their opponents 24-4 while they were at it. Absolute domination in every essence of the word. Champions League-wise, the last group stage match had arrived against Lazio, and thankfully Celtic would get to play this match at home, which had become a fortress for them in Europe this season with wins over PSG and Arsenal at Celtic Park. The first half was a lot like the away leg in Rome, as the first half would end scoreless. The lads did not want to end the group with another draw to Lazio, as they wanted to push on to top their group, which would be a massive achievement in its own right. So, in the 67th minute, Liel Abada would get things rolling, followed by Cameron Carter-Vickers in the 83rd, and to seal things up, a goal by Odin Thiago Holm in the 86th, which would not only see Celtic accrue 3 more points, but win their group against all odds, as they were favorites to be bounced in the group stage. Celtic through on top, with PSG to follow, while Arsenal goes down to the Europa League and Lazio crash out of Europe. This now leaves the League Cup final to be played, where Celtic would once again be traveling to Hampden Park, however this time taking on St. Mirren. The first half was very one-sided for Celtic, yet they couldn't break through. That was until they were given a penalty opportunity in the 45th minute +3, which would see Callum McGregor slot it home to put Celtic up 1-0 heading into half. The second half would get started, and there wouldn't be any real action until in the 81st minute, Celtic broke free on a play that would lead to Kyogo Furuhashi putting one home and securing Celtic the Scottish League Cup. With December done and dusted, January, along with its transfer window, has arrived. With the league going really well, the League Cup already secured, and being through to the Champions League knockout stage, this was a very tricky transfer window as Watt had a decision to make. Go all in on the Champions League run, or hold steady and keep the current group. The decision was made, and all in it was. A little bit of funds were raised as Benji Siegrist, Yosuke Ideguchi, and Tomoki Iwata would all depart on permanent transfers, raising £5.5 million. Which this would for sure come in handy with adding strength to the starting lineup as well as depth. Watt would add 6 new players in the January transfer window, those being Victor Guzman, Cesar Araujo, Frederick Bjorken, Cesar Huerta, Luciano Rodriguez, and the permanent deal was made for loanee Paulo Bernardo. A great amount of depth and squad players that can help ensure that this squad has all the right pieces to have a special year. There would only be 3 matches during the month of January, 2 in the league, and the 4th round match in the Scottish Cup for Celtic's initial match in the competition. The league matches would see Celtic take on St. Mirren and Ross County. St. Mirren gave Celtic a real scare as they wanted revenge for the League Cup final loss, yet Celtic still pulled out a 4-3 win. The match against Ross County would end up being Celtic's biggest result of the year so far, with them downing Ross County with an 8-1 victory that saw them dominate from the word go. The Scottish Cup match would be against Livingston, which would see Callum McGregor and Yuki Kobayashi help secure a 2-0 victory, sending Celtic to the 5th round of the Scottish Cup, which would see them take on Hibernian in February. And speaking of February, the amount of games in this month was almost as bad as December, with 8 games in the month of February, which would include the League, the Scottish Cup, and the Champions League. League-wise, there would be 6 matches in total, the first 3 coming against Aberdeen, Hibernian, and Kilmarnock. Watt's Celtic would see off Aberdeen 4-0, play out to a 2-2 draw against Hibernian, and would drop Kilmarnock 4-1, securing 7 of a possible 9 points. The latter 3 matches were against Hearts, Motherwell, and Dundee. Celtic would go on to outscore these 3 by a score of 16-1 in a 7-day span. Mighty impressive, with the 9-1 win over Hearts now being their largest win margin of the season. In the 5th round of the Scottish Cup, Celtic would take on Hibernian, where thanks to goals from Gustav Langer-Bilke and Dyson Maeda, they would beat them by a score of 2-1, securing a Scottish Cup quarterfinal appearance against Rangers in March. The Champions League round of 16 would kick off this month as well, with Celtic taking on the only French Champions League winners in history, Marseille. The first leg would be played in front of 66,000 people at the Stade de Marseille. Callum McGregor would get things started in the 17th minute off a penalty, with a goal from Matt O'Reilly to follow in the 22nd minute. Loney Joaquin Correa would get Marseille on the board in the 28th minute, bringing the score to 2-1 at halftime. Shortly after restart, Leonardo Balerdi would add a second for Marseille, leveling the game at 2 apiece. Late into the second half, it looked like the result would hold until Leo Obata added a goal in the 88th minute, and Kyogo Furuhashi added another in the 90th minute to help secure a 4-2 first leg victory away from home. March was a nice short month compared to February when it came to games. This time around, there were only 5 matches to prepare for. When it came to the league, it would see Celtic face off against Hearts, St. Johnstone, and Livingston, beating all of them by a combined score of 10-2, making it all but certain that winning the league was within Watt's grasp at this point. All they had to do was keep stringing together wins, and Celtic were golden. When it came to the Scottish Cup quarterfinal, Rangers had been waiting. Celtic's record has been superb against their Glasgow counterparts so far this season, so they wanted to make sure they kept it up here and saw themselves through to the Scottish Cup semi-final. So, they set out and did their business. After a scoreless first half, Callum McGregor got Celtic on the board, followed by Kyogo Furuhashi in the 73rd minute. When it came to added time, Celtic decided to rub salt into Rangers' wounds and added a third goal through Willie Palma and a fourth through Fredrik Bjorken to make it a 4-0 victory over Rangers and another Cup semi-final appearance. When it came to the home leg against Marseille at Celtic Park, things were looking good. A 4-2 first leg win away from home set Celtic up nicely to get the job done at home and see themselves into the quarterfinals of the Champions League. It would not take long for in the 25th minute, Callum McGregor makes it 5-2 on aggregate through a penalty, and shortly after, in the 33rd minute, Kyogo Furuhashi adds another to make it 6-2 to all but confirm a quarterfinal appearance for Watt's Celtic. In the second half, Odin Thiago Holm would back himself a goal in the 63rd minute, with Callum McGregor earning himself a brace in the 81st minute to make it an 8-2 victory on aggregate over Marseille. This started to beg the question, could Celtic really have a chance at winning it all? With Benfica up next in the quarters, we are about to find out. April would arrive and see us take on Rangers once more, along with St. Mirren and Hearts within league play. We would end up winning all 3 of those matches by a combined score of 10-1, which has become something the Celtic fans were growing accustomed to under Watt's leadership at the club. Attractive football and dominance had become the norm in the domestic game. Another example of this dominance would be the Scottish Cup semi-final, where Celtic would take on Kilmarnock and would down them by a score of 5-0, which would secure their second Cup final appearance of the season, as they would take on Motherwell in the final at the end of May. Now when it comes to the Champions League quarterfinal against the Portuguese giants that are Benfica, there would be a lot on the line for both sides. Benfica would be trying to reach a Champions League semi-final and hope for a push to the final so they could end their age-old curse, where Celtic, they would just be hoping for a good performance, as this was their first quarterfinal appearance since 1980. And Watt had them believing they could get the results they needed. This is where they would find out if they were the real deal and if there truly was a real shot at them being able to win it all. With the first leg at home, the roar of Celtic Park behind them, they would get out to an early lead 3 minutes in through Kyogo Furuhashi. A little over 6 minutes later, Kyogo would add his second of the game, putting Celtic up 2-0 within 10 minutes. Right before the end of the first half, Rio Hatate would back himself a goal, making it 3-0 by the end of the first half. The boys got a refresher and went back out for more, and one man cemented himself into Champions League history by completing his hat-trick in the 57th minute while adding a fourth in the 63rd minute. Kyogo Furuhashi had well and truly arrived. A 5-0 lead had Celtic on cloud 9, from the players to the staff to the fans doing the Poznan. However, in the 79th minute, João Mario would get Benfica on the board, followed by a 90th minute goal by Orkun Kochu, making it 5-2, seeing their 5-goal lead now reduced to 3 while now having to go away in the second leg. Had they celebrated too early, could they lose it all in Portugal? No. Dyson Maeda put home a goal in the first 6 minutes of the second leg, and Matt O'Reilly added another in the 11th minute to make it 7-2 on aggregate within the first 15 minutes of the second leg. Then, in the 36th minute, Kasper Tangstedt drilled one home for Benfica to make it 7-3 heading into half. A little while after half, Angel Di Maria made it 7-4 on aggregate with a goal in the 69th minute. But, thankfully, Will Abada put one home in the 87th minute to ensure Celtic through to the Champions League semi-final by a score of 8-4 on aggregate. Far from a comfortable two-legged tie, so things did seem a little shaky at this point. But confidence was at an all-time high. After all, they had just made the semi-final of the Champions League. That confidence was well and truly reduced, though, when they saw who they would be taking on. The icons, legends, and kings of Europe awaited them at the Bernabeu. It was Real Madrid. In the month of May, there were some pretty important matches. Not so much in the league, though, as that had been wrapped up at the end of April, making Celtic 2 for 2 when it came to trophies so far. However, the league matches would still hold some significance, as Celtic was still pushing for an invincible season in the league at this point. There were 4 matches left to play in the league. Those were against Kilmarnock, Rangers, Hibernian, and Aberdeen. Watt and his merry men would go on to beat Kilmarnock 3-0, with Rangers coming up next. They would end up drawing Rangers 2-2, making it an unbeaten run for the year against their biggest rivals. Next would be Hibernian, which would see them secure a late win through Canadian Alistair Johnson and Honduran Luis Palma to make a 3-1 victory. That left Aberdeen as a club who could end it all and disrupt the invincible season right at the end. The match was at Celtic Park, though, so there could really only be one outcome: a 4-0 win, securing an invincible league campaign. This Celtic side solidified themselves amongst legends with this feat, as they topped their previous point total from 2017 with 108 points, which was 2 more than the 2017 season when they also went invincible in league play. There was one last domestic game to be played, though, and that was a Scottish Cup against Motherwell at Hampden Park. Celtic win this, and they complete an invincible season across all domestic competitions. So, they set out to see it through, and they did, with a 6-0 victory, which saw 4 goals alone coming from Callum McGregor. This side, with that achievement, became the greatest Scottish side to ever lace up their boots. Also, within this time frame was of course the Champions League semi-final, which would see them take on the Giants that are Real Madrid. The first match was to be played away from home at the Bernabeu. This match was the definition of David versus Goliath. If Celtic were to prevail, they would need every bounce, every card, every decision to go their way. But who are we kidding? They're playing Real Madrid. Of course that won't happen. So all they could do for these 90 minutes would be to give it their all and to hope and pray they can hang on to muster a fight back at Celtic Park. Around the 21st minute of the first leg, the dream of the Champions League final was under threat, as Rodrigo would put Real Madrid up 1-0, which would hold until half. At first glance, 1-0 doesn't look that bad. However, Real Madrid always truly shows up in the second half, and this match was no different. In the 68th minute, Vinicius Jr. would make it 2-0 to Real Madrid, and Joselu would make it 3-0 in the 87th minute. The dream of a Champions League final had been well and truly dashed at that point. The second leg, of course, would be at Celtic Park. The fortress it had become for Watt and his men this season meant that there may be a ray of hope left. Yes, being down 3-0 to Real Madrid means all the odds in the world are stacked against you, but when you believe, anything can happen. The return leg to Celtic Park had arrived. The men were ready to go, and for 90 minutes, they would have to duke it out with the world's best for a shot at potential glory and being crowned the kings of Europe. Around 27 minutes had passed in the match when there was finally a first breakthrough. Luis Palma would see Celtic get a goal back to bring the aggregate score to 3-1 with plenty of time remaining. However, that would be the only goal of the first half, so Celtic knew what was waiting for them in the second half, and they were not about to let it happen again. After all, they knew if they could believe, anything was possible. The second half would get underway, and right after restart, Reo Hatate would see himself bring Celtic to within 1 goal of being level on aggregate. The score was 3-2, and everyone knew something special was on their hands. In the 59th minute, the star boy Kyoga Furuhashi blasted Celtic level at 3-3 against the mighty Real Madrid. Down 3-0 at the Bernabeu to being level at 3-3 at Celtic Park. The power of a home field advantage was on full display for Watt and his men. However, the job wasn't finished. Celtic knew that, and so did Madrid. That is why, in the 74th minute, Aurelien Tchouameni would put Real Madrid back up on aggregate by a score of 4-3, which saw the life drained from the crowd and players alike. Everything they had worked for to bring themselves back into this fight dashed away in mere moments, and it looking like their road would end here with the Champions League final in hand's reach. The fans regrouped, got the team to regroup themselves, and Watt and his men gave everything they had left to force extra time and get that game-tying goal. In the 90th minute, at the death of regulation time, Danny Vivian would misplay a pass to David Alaba, which would see Dyson Maeda intercept, make a run, and slot it home to send Celtic Park into hysterics. Celtic had brought it back twice against Madrid. The unthinkable made reality. They would see extra time come and go. To penalties they went. Bellingham and Turnbull would be the first two to take. They would both miss. Both Madrid and Celtic would then trade pen for pen. That was until Denis Ceballos would step up and have his pen saved by 37-year-old Joe Hart, which would see the comeback end in victory, Celtic through to the Champions League final, and the miracle of Celtic Park forever etched in history. David had slayed Goliath, and Barcelona awaited their final opponent in the Champions League final at Wembley. All roads seem to have led to Wembley this season. After an incredible domestic campaign and an incredible run within Europe, only one game remained. A game where icons are born and legends are made. The Champions League final had arrived. Celtic aren't here based on luck. They have earned every right to be here at the world's biggest stage in club football. Taking on the historic Barcelona, no less, it will not be easy by any stretch of the imagination. The first half would get underway, and within the 27th minute, Joe Hart would go down injured, meaning Celtic would have to play with their backup. However, the first half would come and go, ending scoreless. Neither side could break through, and it was the exact same outcome in the second half. There had been 90 minutes played, and nothing could separate Celtic from Barcelona. Perhaps extra time was holding the answers both sides were looking for. Well, with Joao Cancelo being sent off, it seemed it was, at least for one side, as in the 101st minute, we finally got a breakthrough by the Honduran, Louis Palma, to see Celtic up 1-0 in time for a lead right before half. Then, after restart, in the closing moments of the final, Louis Palma would break free once again and make it a brace for himself to help Celtic to a 2-0 victory, and not just winning the Champions League, but solidifying the quadruple for only the second time in history. A truly magical season, becoming one of the best seasons in Football Manager history. So, like the great Al Michael once said, do you believe in miracles? I hope you do now. Hey everybody, it is currently 3:55 a.m. here in the States where I am, and I actually just got done editing the video you all just watched. I hope you all did enjoy, and I mean, this is basically big time thank you for obviously sticking around watching the whole thing, but also thank you for basically being able to allow me to bring you guys content like this, being a part of the community, the FM community in general, and having the journeys like this to where I am able to bring it to life for all you guys. So I hope you guys did enjoy, and who knows, maybe in the future I'll be doing some more videos like this, maybe some journeys that I go on myself within FM, or even more from you guys as well. But If you guys did happen to enjoy, please feel free, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, have a good one. Bye-bye.